that comments were made, I think, by Councilmember Parks at that time was full implementation meant new laptops, because the equipment that we have now is 4 years old and it's not capable of running the new software. It's capable of running it, but at an incredibly reduced rate. And so we were tasked with looking at new funding sources. Obviously, in this current economy, the only funding source that we have is the one-stop funds that are collected. Namely, I think that Councilmember Parks asked us to look at new funding sources and or the possibility of creating a surcharge fee on permits that would pay for this. Well, we already collect that surcharge fee in the form of a one-stop fee, and those monies, as you know, are open to several departments. We have chosen not to go to the one-stop committee and ask for these right now because we're currently in the middle of a development reform study with a private contractor that was contracted through the mayor's office to look at development reform in the place of 12-2 for city planning, building and safety, and BOE are the three main departments, but all the departments that are involved in that. So we're waiting for that study to be done to find out what their recommendations for technology are going to be before we jump in with our request for a laptop. So we're kind of limping by until that happens.
How long do you think you have to continue to limp by before you can actually?
Well, their study was a 6-month study, and they just started a month ago, so we're probably, we're 5 months into it. I know it's really difficult. The problem with, somebody said one time, to chase technology, you have to rob a liquor store and wear track shoes because you just can't keep up with it. Unfortunately, in our case, is that we have a very dedicated IT staff that are very creative, and they've got great software for us to use, but our laptops are, anything that's 4 years old is not going to be able to work. We've even tried increasing the power of these laptops, and it still is, we get the job done, but barely.
Is it costing us money to continue to have this antiquated system?
That would be a difficult thing to measure. I know that we, in lieu of, what the system we're looking at would be obviously kind of an iPad scenario where you have, a nice piece of equipment that you can do an inspection, have everything that's on your desktop in front of you so that we don't have to be in the office. We can be in the field more often. In fact, we can do a virtual office scenario where we don't have to have as many rented spaces for inspectors to gather in the mornings. That's a cost savings. If they can do the work on the laptop as they do it and not wait till the end of the day and do all the downloads and uploads, that saves us time because we can be doing inspections instead of doing that paperwork. So in measure of lease space and time spent, yes, it's costing us money. But we're still doing the same number of inspections, and we're doing the inspections that we need to do. We're just doing them in a manner that it takes a little bit more time to do the paperwork. It's still better than with a pencil paper, but it could be much faster. We could probably increase our efficiency.
So any way you can think of to speed up this funding, and is there an additional surge charge we can add, or we're only talking about carving up existing funds?
Well, it's just existing funds. The one-stop surcharge is put into a fund, and it can only be used and spent on things that enhance customer service. Well, we think obviously this enhances customer service because we get to more customers in the same amount of time. But that's a very small pot compared to what all the departments are going to have to do to step up our efforts in development reform. And that is, the key in development reform right now, or the overarching subject matter is, how can I as a developer see what's happening with my project when it's in 6 or 8 different departments at the same time? So they're talking about creating one big database with one single tracking number that you can see everything that's happening. Well, our database that we currently have, our PCIS system, could be a backbone for that because we already have a lot of that information in there, and it can be built off of that. The system that our inspectors use also run off that same data. If we jump the gun and create something that we can use right now, it may not be as efficient as what could be done if all the resources from the city are brought to bear at the same time. So yes, I could solve the problem short term if I had the money, but I'm actually more interested in waiting to see what they have to say, because we may be able to leapfrog from technology that will work for me today to something that's going to carry me and be sustainable for the next 5 to 10 years.
So it actually makes sense to wait it out and not try to jump ahead and implement this more quickly.
Yes, it does.
Kind of counterintuitive, but
I know, it's hard to even say, but yes, you're right.
But I guess
we need to wait.
We should suffer through it for
Right.
a while. I know your department is engaged in a code violation inspection fee program. How's it work, and what are the expectations for the first year?
Good afternoon, Council Member. Dave Lara with Building and Safety. We're, as a matter of fact, in 2 days, we will be implementing the code violation inspection fee. This is a fee, for your information, that in past, when an inspector would go out and do an actual investigation on a site, there'd be a lot of legwork involved, a lot of staff hours, research, time to get out to the site and investigate. And given the fact that, code enforcement is a general funded activity, that's money that's been set in the past has never really been recovered. Now we have a system of doing that through this, what we call CVIF fee, which again will be in effect on February the 3rd. This is a $336 fee, which as soon as we send an inspector out and we verify that a violation does exist, and once we issue an order, that fee will then be implemented. And if that fee, if there's no compliance till that point, 30 days past the original due date or the original date of the order, then that fee actually increases to $1,176. Now, we're estimating that in a full fiscal year, we could probably recoup about over $2 million on this particular fee. So that's we're optimistic about that. Just as a side, we are working jointly with the City Attorney's Office on the Administrative Citation Enforcement Ordinance, which includes several fees for violators. But at this time, though, that ordinance, it's still actually in Budget and Finance Committee waiting for a report back. So it has not been moving as of yet, but we're working very closely with the City Attorney's Office on that. And we hope that sometime, hopefully as soon as before the end of this fiscal year, that those fees will be coming forward.
Any idea what we could do to move that along?
Well, I think we're just waiting for a report back from the CAO's office on that, which I believe they're currently working on it right now.
Okay, well, that would certainly be a big step forward too. So if there's anything this committee or my office can do to help move that along, please let us know.
Thank you.
And I don't think there's anything else, so we will note and file that report.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your progress in this arena. Now, item number 4.
Item number 4 is a city controller report relative to the follow-up audit of energy conservation measures in the city and associated follow-up correspondence. This item has also been referred to the Energy and Environment Committee.
Okay, well,
Good afternoon. Wale Oyewale with City Controllers. Just a brief background and history on the program. The city pays approximately $27 million annually for water and electricity. Over the last decade and a half, there have been various attempts to implement measures to reduce water and electricity usage. Back in 1996, the City Council authorized GSD to implement an energy-saving retrofit program. Initially, GSD used performance guarantees with 4 energy service companies to retrofit 15 city buildings with high energy usage. The escorts were paid or were to be paid from energy savings generated from their retrofits. Because of the complexity and the difficulties with the performance, with monitoring and calculating savings under the performance guarantee provisions, GSD decided to discontinue using the performance guarantee agreements to perform the retrofits and brought the retrofits in-house. To continue the program, the council directed GSD to obtain a $10 million loan from the Department of Water and Power and to pay the loans back from the savings generated from the projects. In 2008, our office issued another report on the GSD's program. The 2008 audit examined conservation project selection, management, and financing of projects. The audit found, in general, a lack of adequate program planning and citywide coordination. Specific issues that we discussed in that audit included no city department with oversight, responsibility, and accountability for coordinating energy conservation measures. Other than the GSD program, there were other departments with their own separate programs. Also, the audit noted that in the 12 years the program has started, the department had only completed 102 retrofits out of the over 1,000 city buildings. In addition, there was a lack of oversight over the fund, the Energy Conservation Loan Program Fund. The report contained 18 recommendations for improvement, and in 2010, our office went back to assess the progress that's been made on those recommendations that were made in the 2008 audit. Overall, the follow-up audit determined that GSD has implemented or makes significant progress on all the recommendations that were made in 2008. A couple of recommendations that were not fully implemented at the time of the follow-up related to the reimbursement of general fund for labor cost and the use of energy-saving companies or hiring halls to be able to complete more projects. However, with respect to the general fund reimbursement, subsequent to our field work, GSD reimbursed the general fund approximately $1.1 million for prior expenses. So the follow-up report also discussed the need for the city to develop a mechanism to properly track, transfer, and set aside savings from projects for loan payment or reinvestment. Because at the time of the audit, although we noted that GSD budgets loan payment from the Water and Electricity Fund, there was no clear mechanism to properly track and set aside savings from projects for loan payments. We believe that establishing methodology to properly do that is necessary to decrease reliance on loans for projects. The department did respond to the follow-up audit, and the response was satisfactory. The response did indicate that the program was suspended at the time. I believe the department may be able to provide a more update as to what's going on with the program and any future plans.
Okay. What's the department's response, particularly on the savings tracking issue?
We have always had in place a very sound methodology for tracking our savings. We have a measurement and verification process in place where we measure energy usage in a building before we do the retrofit. And then we identify the equipment we're going to install as part of the retrofit, and we can calculate what the kilowatt savings is. In addition to that, we can, based upon the current electrical rate, determine how much savings in real dollars that's going to be. Our commitment and our policy and our strategy has been to take the savings and use the savings to do more energy retrofits in city-owned buildings. And that's the methodology we've been following in addition to the reimbursements to the general fund.
And how's it worked? How's this policy worked? Has it been successful?
Well, we are committed to saving energy for a couple of reasons. One is that we know looming in the future are going to be additional increases in our kilowatt rate for electricity. One of the reasons why we're committed to these retrofits is to reduce the current consumption so that we can reduce our current cost. And as those increases occur in the future, we don't have to come back to the mayor and city council and ask for additional funding in our water and electricity account. So that's one of the driving forces for making sure that every dollar that we can make available through either the DWP's loan program, the California Energy Commission's loan program, or through some of the AURA grants that we're going to get, we are committed to doing as many energy retrofits as possible, not only just to, reduce the amount of energy that we use, but to reduce our carbon footprint. So it's all part of our entire strategy in the city to address some major issues that impact the environment.
Now, I know in my discussions with DWP and in other places, I've always argued that the first thing we should be doing in terms of reducing our reliance on coal, et cetera, is conservation, that it's the cheapest and easiest thing to do, and that we should be doing that before every other expenditure we're looking at. Now, why is DWP not funding more of this?
Well, I guess DWP needs to answer that question, but we have an agreement that allows us to borrow up to a maximum of $10 million. And once we get to that threshold, we have a commitment from the DWP to replenish that fund and to always keep it at about $10 million. The unique thing about this loan program and the unique thing about...
So are they loaning us the $10 million, or are they giving us the $10 million?
The unique thing about this is that we are borrowing the money, and GSD is taking on debt service. And that debt service is going to be coming from the savings that we accrue as a result of doing the energy retrofit. There's some criteria in place. One is we're almost paying 6% interest. We have discovered through the California Energy Commission, they have a loan program where the interest is only 2 to 3%, okay? So, in my professional capacity, I kind of have to look at that like I would if I was taking out a loan for myself. It doesn't make a lot of sense for us to be borrowing money at almost 6% when we can borrow it from the state of California for 2 to 3%. The other thing is that in this current climate, we have to be very, very mindful of how much debt service is absorbed by the Department of General Services, because we don't know how the future fiscal and budgetary challenges might impact our water and electricity account, and that's where we take the funding for the debt service against the loans with the DWP. So they are loans, Councilman.
Now, I'm wondering why or whether there's some way for the DWP to pick up this program or to expand the program, because they spend a lot of money on energy conservation, doing consumers one by one, giving them light bulbs, giving them new toilets and refrigerators and whatever else. But why couldn't they use some of that kind of funding to fund some of the bigger projects by making the city more energy conservation minded?
Councilman, that's an excellent question, and it's one that I have asked for the last 12 years while we've been doing energy conservation. And I have approached every general manager over the last 12 years, except for the current general manager, about why that loan can't be a grant. And each time I was rebuffed.
Well, I think that's a question this committee should ask formally. Unfortunately, the general manager stepped out of the room, so he would have heard this.
Smart man.
I don't think it was intentional. I'm sure he wasn't psychic enough to know the question I was going to ask, but I think that's a question we should be looking at. I can't imagine he would have an answer about why it wouldn't be done, because he's too new, but I'm hoping he's new enough to be open-minded and maybe help pick up that cost, because that's certainly a direction we should be going in. Ideally, every one of these buildings should be retrofitted as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
And it would be in both the city's interest and the DWP's interest to make it happen. So that's something I'll probably ask for a report back on, but maybe I'll ask it of the DWP when we have the general manager back before us. Anything else we should be looking at on this issue? It seems like it's moving in the right direction. Perhaps, what about the energy loan program that was halted. Is that going to be reestablished?
That was only halted with the DWP at a point when they notified us that they were no longer funded. That program with the DWP has now been refunded, and we will be submitting some applications to the DWP, but also we're going to be exploring the possibilities with the California Energy Commission just because of the difference in the interest rate.
Okay, and now that I happen to have him in the room, probably wasn't expecting to be asked this question under this item, but if I could ask the general manager to come forward, I'll ask a quick question on this energy conservation program. And the question has been, historically, the DWP has helped to fund this program on a grant basis, and yet the DWP actually pays for a lot of energy conservation measures to help consumers conserve. Why would the DWP not actually fund this measure?
I believe,
or this program, I should
Ann
say.
Santilli, Interim Chief Financial Officer for DWP. Charter Section 679 lays out 9 things that the department can use the money for. We can't do grants for energy efficiency, but what we do is we do loans for the city and other businesses. We also do rebates. And so what we have to do is we have to charge a small percentage, a 0.5% above what it costs us to borrow funds. So that's why the gentleman was explaining that our rate is about 5 to 6%, because our cost of borrowed funds is approximately 5%. So what we do is we offer this to all businesses. We can't just do it for the city because that would be considered a gift of public funds. But what we do is we offer a program for all departments, all businesses. If they want to do energy efficiency, they can get a loan, and they also qualify for rebates.
Yeah, somehow funding a sister agency that's part of the city seems questionable. That would really be a gift of public funds. If you're actually open to actually funding this program, I would have the city attorney look at whether we actually think that applies to the city. I mean, I know you expend a lot of money on trying to do energy conservation. Probably will do even more so in the future, hopefully. I would figure if you can pay for light bulbs and toilets and other things for private individuals, here's a chance to capture some much larger amounts of energy conservation and do it more quickly if there's a way to help to fund this. So if you're open to exploring this, because I know past general managers have not been that cooperative on this particular issue, then I think we'll look at conversations with the city attorney to see if it actually can be done.
Yes, Ron Nichols, General Manager, Department of Water and Power, and I'm certainly we're willing to look into that and see what the what constraints there are about that, and confirm that our understanding is correct. But also obviously talk about evaluating the prospect as we look forward at renewing, because we are going to be renewing our plans for our energy efficiency programs going forward, as to whether there is some rebate approach that could also work in lieu of a loan, if that might be more cost effective. We can certainly look at those items and get back on that.
Well, certainly, if there's a way to do that, and if there's a way to do more work in this arena so it gets done more quickly, you're talking about a lot of energy savings or a lot of energy wasted in the time that we don't get it done. So I appreciate your openness to this, and we'll give direction to staff to have conversations with the city attorney to clarify whether or not there's a way to do this without it being a gift of public funds to the public, which is the city. So I thank you for that. If there's no other questions, which there obviously will not be since there's no other members, we will receive and file this item. Thank you. Actually, I'm going to reopen that item, and I think I'm actually going to leave it open pending that response so we can at least continue the dialogue on that issue without creating a new item.
For the record, Councilmember, you'll be continuing this item?
Yeah, we'll continue this item. Item number 2.
Item number 2, pardon me, item number 2, various reports from the City Controller, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, City Administrative Officer, and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to the Department of Water and Power's response regarding the transfer of surplus power revenue funds.
Oh, and I actually made an error. I missed having Dr. Clyde Williams come up on item number 4, so I will do that before we move on to the next item.
For item number 4, but it is connected to item number 2 also. The final report
And I'll let you speak through and then speak to item number 2 as long as you're up, since that's
Okay.
up as well.
They're related. Yeah, the final report indicated no one department has overall oversight for coordinating energy conservation within the city of Los Angeles. And as you and most anybody would say, well, Department of Water and Power. Water and Power. Why aren't they conducting the audits of every department? Because they get one very vital thing. They get a bill paid. And they have, hopefully, the records of all the meters for both water and power for the entire city, including the city buildings. So it would seem like almost a no-brainer to have them do the audit of the energy conservation and efficiency, and it should be done based upon floor area, lumens, and such like that. Full cost recovery, yeah. In fact, the coming year's donation from the Department of Water and Power to the City of Los Angeles has a little caveat. Less money will be transferred if there are any outstanding bills. So is this something like ECAF was last year? I don't know. But it does have in the ordinance that they propose and such. And this is only roughly $259 million in 13 payments. So are we going down the same track? There was another audit comment.
And I'll ask you to wrap up on item number 4.
I will. Oh, that was 4 and 2.
Okay, now you can move on to 2.
The basic element was that, and there was a comment in the audit report, they don't act as if they are part of the city. Same way with Harbor Department, same way with LAWA. They don't act as if they're part of the city. The neighborhood councils have an MOU with the DWP that says that we're supposed to review and communicate information regarding rates. Well, we get 3 days notice. So you might say that's a good time. Sometimes it's just, boom, it's done. In the background, for the funds that are going to be transferred, what are they based upon? Because right now, DWP has spent a lot of money to do a strategic plan for the entire corporation, a corporate strategic plan, which should be the basis for any reasonable organization. The library has one, fire department, various other departments within the city of Los Angeles has such a thing. And that gives everybody the same page to work on, whereas with DWP, you have the IRP here, and you have the urban water here, and you have this here and that there. It's all scattered out. Is that on purpose? We don't know, because we can't get access. There's some question right now as to trust. And if you ask most of the neighborhood councils, do you trust the DWP? No. transparency. Can you get in and out of the DWP any real information in a timely fashion? No. So we're quite concerned about the relationships here within the city. Make them part of the city government. Thank you.
Thank you. And now if we could ask the city controller's office and DWP representatives to come up. And first, if the controller's office could give us your current thoughts on this audit and where things stand.
Great. Fair so far with the controller's office. With me is John Modlin of Crow Holworth, who was in charge of the audit at the time that we conducted. The document before you is the controller's evaluation of DWP's response to the controller's report that was related to the transfer of surplus fund, which we issued back in June of 2010. The controller's report generally evaluated the reasons that DWP raised for not transferring the surplus fund. Our report concluded at that time that DWP could have made the transfer without jeopardizing its financial position. Subsequent to that report, we received a response from DWP, generally disagreeing with the conclusion and findings that we have in our report. We evaluated that response. We find nothing in that response that would highlight inaccuracies or misstatement of facts. Therefore, we stand by our findings and conclusions, and they are valid, and we believe DWP had options to transfer the fund at that time.
Thank you. And I certainly have my own opinion, which is probably not far from the city controller's. I'm not going to ask that we have an exhaustive discussion of the truthfulness of letters going back and forth in these two council files, or rehash the arguments that we fought with the DWP last year. But the department's decision to withhold $73 million and transfer the general fund definitely raised a lot of eyebrows and a lot of questions, many of which were answered in the controller's analysis. Certainly based on the controller's reputation for honesty and transparency, and my own experiences having gone through the whole ECAF disaster that we all went through, reading what everyone had to say on the issue, including Austin Buettner's July 19th, 2010 letter to the Energy and Environment Committee. A few things seem to become clear about the reasons why the DWP threatened to withhold the $73.5 million transfer. First, a fundamental problem did exist in the lines of communication between DWP's management and its board, and the lack of communication between the DWP and the City Council. Buettner's letter makes it clear this fundamental communication gap did exist during his predecessor's administration of the department. And we saw the need for increased communication between DWP and other affected parties, and I believe he saw that as well. The department did seem to believe that it could operate in a vacuum, that they believed they didn't have a duty to operate in a way that doesn't harm the assets and other obligations of the city. In other words, as if it wasn't the city sister agency and it didn't have a certain obligation to watch out for the city as well as its ratepayers. Mr. Buettner's letter clearly states that there's a need for the department to engage in a meaningful communication with the city about such important issues going forward, and we hope that that'll happen. A fundamental lack of respect of management's position vis-a-vis its board became clear, and many other problems were presented when DWP management made decisions without adequate input not only from city officials but its own board. And management appeared to be able to decide which policies and decisions the board could participate in and which they would make their own decisions on without requesting insider guidance from the board. For example, the decision to inform the city that the $73.5 million transfer was not forthcoming appeared to be decided by the management, not the board. And that, in fact, the board consented to the transfer only a few weeks later, which is a very bizarre way for the DWP overall to have operated. The fact that DWP management made decisions without feeling obligated to coordinate with the board or the rest of the governmental structure of the city made it clear that there was a lack of an attitude of teamwork existing within the DWP's management. An example of this is management's unilateral decision that the transfer to the city should be DWP's last or lowest priority when considering its options to manage its cash balances. Instead of engaging its board and or the council in a discussion to determine how spending priorities could be determined for the capital improvements, the maintenance of adequate liquidity balance, and the payment of the transfer to the city, the DWP management apparently gave no consideration to the city as to how other assets and obligations to the city might be harmed by this decision. Obviously, this is not a good situation. We want to see how we can correct it. And I would ask Mr. Nichols whether you've had a chance to evaluate the existing management team that was in place when you began your tenure here at the DWP, and whether you've made any changes or anticipate any changes to address the problems that some or all of that management team were responsible for.
Well, thank you, Councilman. Ron Nichols, General Manager, Department of Water and Power, and I'm here with Interim CFO Ann Santilli as well. We were just up a few moments ago. I'm really hoping that we're not here on a basis to rehash the ups and downs and the ins and outs of the discussions that happened last summer prior to my tenure.
And I'm not. I just wanted to lay some groundwork, but
right.
Essentially what's done is done, but we want to make sure it's not redone in the future.
Well, what's done is done, and I'm hoping that's a part of our collective past that's behind us, and that we will move forward on a more collaborative basis. I would note on a particularly positive note today that at our Board of Commissioners meeting today that we did approve the transfer of this year's funds in the amounts of $258,815,000. Half of that, which will be paid within 10 days after the effective date of the order, after the council has acted on that, and then our plans are for the balance of that to be paid out, split evenly over the balance of the year, on a monthly basis. So the issue is there, the money is
right.
The money is there, the money is in our budget going forward, and we have the cash flow to provide for that. So in that regard, we don't anticipate any issues, anything approaching the issues that we had last year, neither in terms of communication issues, nor from cash flow problems at all. And like I said, I hope the matter is behind us. Councilman, I know as you and I have spoken past, it's certainly my interest and desire to have a very transparent, open, and very highly communicative relationship between the department, the council, and the city as a whole. I think you'll see those statements taken out in actions on a go-forward basis. Part of which we'll be discussing here over the next few weeks as we work forward on collaborating our budget with the city's budget process, as well as going forward and giving more information out to the public, to the neighborhood councils, and to the city council relative to our considerations of kind of our alternatives as we go forward, looking at rate adjustments for the department, and doing so in a very open manner.
Well, obviously, we've had multiple changes in general managers, and I have every confidence in you, and I'm excited that you're here in this position. But I know one of the difficulties each new general manager has faced is there's a pretty entrenched bureaucracy. Some people are used to doing things their own way and being pretty bureaucratic about it. Do you have confidence in the team that's in place to be sure that this kind of thing won't happen again? Or are there people that you will have to hold their arm behind their back and twist hard to get to cooperate?
Well,
do you have a sense of that yet?
I do have a sense of that, and it's a very positive one. That is, to begin with, each of the senior assistant general managers have worked with me since day one, which isn't too many days back, as you'll recall, to go over assessment of the status of many major items within the department, where our programs are, activities of on a go-forward basis, budgets, expenditures, all the things that are certainly relevant to issues pertaining to transfer and as well as rates and our recovery of our costs. And I've been very pleased with the openness of that, the candor of the discussion, the responsiveness that I've had with them on that. I'm only about, 9 days into the job right now. Is that a fair estimate of what it's going to be going forward? I believe so, and so far I'm pleased with what I've seen, have shared with all of them, and my desire to not have this issue that we had happen before, and is reiterating what I said before, to have a much more transparent and open process related to budgets, rates, city transfers, capital expenditures, our programs, and interaction with the public as well. And they seem to be embracing that, working through that, and I think you will see. Evidence of those changes coming about very soon.
Do you have a sense that there'll be complete team players, not only working with you, but in being more cognizant of their impact on the city, and the fact that they also have to take the city's health seriously as a factor, and not just look at their own fiscal and operating health as the DWP?
Well, I don't want to be disagreeable with you, Councilman. They are a separate organization that does have certain bond covenants and responsibilities related to what the department has to do, and they do take that very seriously. And they have a very specified set of covenanted and standard flow of funds and such that are taken into account. And I know they will be mindful of it, that they have to be mindful of that in order to be fiscally responsible to what obligations of the department are. That said, I think particularly in light of recognizing kind of the economic conditions that we're in, I think being mindful of communicating where we are on things, being able to make sure that we know better what the interactions are between, and the timeliness of interactions between the department and the council and the rest of the city has been placed well in their minds. But I would always hope, and don't take this in any pejorative way at all, but I would always hope that the department is making sure that they are meeting the absolute responsibilities that they have to meet for their finances, for their requirements. To do otherwise, I think, would put the entire city at jeopardy.
Right. Although I think even in the controller's report, I think it was noted that DWP also has a certain amount of obligation to also be concerned about the assets and obligations of the city, and to try and make sure that they don't harm that in their operations, as they certainly did with the activities around the transfer and some of the other things that went on in the recent past.
Well, again, I really can't speak to all the sequence of activities that happened last year. I can pledge to you that we will enhance our discussions back and forth, keep a better open dialogue back and forth. My operating philosophy is around no surprises, and that means good communication back and forth between the department and the rest of the city on those issues, and to the extent that of the obligations that we have on that transfer, I think the actions that the board has taken today is clearly they recognize those obligations. They voted for it. They moved forward with no question, no issue associated with making it that timely transfer.
And we also at one point were considering removing the bonding authority from the DWP and putting it under the CAO because of the department's apparent misuse of that authority and manipulation of that to also try to be part of holding us hostage for the funding that they were looking for. I'm thinking that won't be necessary. I'm hoping that won't be necessary. I mean, under everything that you're anticipating. Although we've given instructions to the CLA to look at that. I think for now I won't ask for that report back because I don't see any signs of lack of transparency and helpfulness and cooperation from your department. I think it's heading in the right direction. But you should know that things were serious enough for us to consider that, and even more dramatic measures. I mean, at one point, as I mentioned to you before, we were even looking at whether the amount of lack of truthfulness to obtain funding could have been even cause for criminal prosecution on the parts of some of your managers. Of course, it also looked like it was enough of a case of hide the ball that we'd never really figure out who's responsible. But also, I agree, at this point, I think it's in the past. I'm hopeful that with your strong management, we'll have the kind of cooperation and transparency that'll actually make it much better for the city and the DWP. So I'm hopeful that those stronger measures won't be necessary. Let me ask a question of the Controller's Office. Based on all of your analysis, do we have reasons to feel confident that we can get this department under control with a general manager that seems to be responsive and pushing for more transparency? Or do you have a feeling that some of these managers still will be difficult to move into line?
Well, the controller is looking forward to working with the department, and we are hoping that we never have to deal with the situation of auditing this transfer again. I can only speak into organizational structure. That was not part of our audit, but again, as I said, controller is looking forward to working with the department and making sure that we don't have that situation again.
Well, I'm not sure I have any further questions. I keep my fingers crossed that everything goes as we hope. Rather than noting and filing this report, I think I'll ask that we continue it on the bonding piece of it. I'm not going to ask that anyone come back with a report, but we'll keep an eye on the department and see if our confidence continues. I'm assuming it will, but I want to keep that option open for now. Other than that, I wish you good luck in pulling this department together and look forward to a collaborative and cooperative relationship in the future.
Thank you. We both share that goal.
And thank you for your good work so far. Thank you to the Controller's Office as well. I guess, unfortunately, the committee must still be going on, so Mr. Parks has not yet joined us, but we will hear item number 1 in any case. So,
Item number 1 was continued from the meeting of January 4th, 2011. This is a city controller report relative to its audit of the Department of Recreation and Parks contract with J.R. Kishie Company, which manages golf cart rentals at the city's 5 major golf courses and a forensic audit of the report of gross receipts and related payments by J.R. Kishi Company for the years ending December 2006 through to 2008.
And well, I have some questions, and I think Mr. Parks has some questions, which I will try and ask on his behalf. But first, I'll let the Controller's Office give an introductory report as to what you think of the current situation is, and if you're satisfied that Rec and Parks has responded to your recommendations.
Rick Taguchi, Controller's Office. With me is Mike DeCastro from TCBA. TCBA performed the audit under our direction. Mike can give you some background about the audit.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon. The audit report was issued back in August of 2010. The audit covered a 3-year period, looking at calendar years 2006, 7, and 8. The total rental payments by Kishi made during that period was about $4.6 million. The contract required that Kishi pay the city the greater of $1 million per year, or 47% of annual gross receipts. Our audit looked at the payments to determine whether or not there were any underpayments to the city, and we did find that there was about $35,000 of underpayments, which equates to about $16,000 of underpaid golf rental fees, representing the 47%. Unfortunately, we were unable to determine if there were any other underpayments as a result of Kishi being on a cash basis in collecting golf rental fees. So there is a reasonable possibility that Kishi did underreport other revenues as well. I did want to point out the $35,000 was just related to golf tournaments.
Right.
Which had a little bit more accounting for. So the poor internal control environment at Kishi, being a manual cash basis accounting, again, could lead to, could result in other underreported revenues. We did an analysis after the fact. RAP took over the golf cart rental process in terms of the collection of golf cart rental fees back in March of 2010. We compared a 3-month period of March to May of 2010 in terms of revenues received at that time and collected by RAP to the same period in 2009, and found that the golf revenues actually were 14% higher in 2010, although fees remained the same. And also golf rounds decreased by about 5%, which is an indication that Kishi may have underreported, again, golf revenues over and beyond what we found. So that's basically what our audit.
Based on the 14%, do you have a way to calculate an estimate of what that underreporting level might have been?
Not offhand, we don't.
And that seems like a significant number of additional captured fees. So
I don't think with any certainty you can. There could be other variables that could have played into this that Kishi could contend. But, to say for certainty you can come up with a figure of underreported revenues would be very difficult. That to really stand upon and go after Kishi for the underreporting amount. That's my take.
Yes.
now, Mr. Parks had a question that hadn't occurred to me, which is right now Recreation and Parks runs the whole operation, my understanding?
Regina Adams, Executive Officer, Recreation and Parks. As of January 1st of this year, we have now begun self-operation of the electric golf carts.
So how did that transition take place? I know in the RFP process, the council had questions about whether the person that finished first in that process had enough experience to do it. How did that transition from then going back to Kishi and doing another process to having Rec and Parks take it over?
Where there are 7 variables, 7 things that changed within the last couple of years. One, when we originally started with the RFP process, and it had been for the past 30-plus years, this service had been contracted out, and Kishi had that contract. And then what happened was just this current fiscal year and going through the budget process last fiscal year, the mayor and council directed Department of Recreation and Parks to make our golf division self-sufficient, which means that we had to go through and we had to really go through and determine what was in the operations and how we could streamline it. And with that, of course, that means we had to cut back on our cost, but also, too, to figure out how we could make it more efficient. So that was a big change for us. And then also, as the controller has mentioned last year as well, we started taking over the collection of the money from Kishi. So with those things, we were getting more experience under our belt. And also, too, of course, the unions had come forward many times and thought we could do the service as well, which we knew we could because we already were doing that at one of our golf courses, Harbor, already. So there were variables that were taking place. And also when we came back through the council in September of 2009, and we were directed to go back and look more closely about potentially a few years down the line about doing the self-operation of the service. Those were things that led us to look at it and say, okay, is this something that we think is viable and that we could do? And so that's finally what we ended up doing. Our board directed us to go back and to end the RFP process and to bring it in-house.
Any sense yet of how we're doing fiscally? Have we streamlined the operation
we did
well
streamline.
enough and save money in that process?
Yes, what we ended up doing, we had to remove some of the employees, of course, labor costs. We moved them elsewhere within the department. We also are running this operation with part-time staff to bring down the cost. And so that's to say, and because we already had some experience under our belt, we also got more experience when we started, taking over the cash operations.
And is there any takeaway that your department has gotten from all of this? Any experience that you've gained that will help in looking at other departments? And do we have any other problematic concession contracts that we should be looking at with a similarly focused eye to whether we could streamline those concessions?
Well, one of the things that was one of the recommendations that was in the controller audit is that, for moving forward, we have made sure, first of all, this operation, Kishi had been the provider for many, many years. And when they came in and continued, they were doing everything on a cash basis. And of course, for us moving forward, we have put things in place and moving forward, that of course, that is not the way that we would want to run any operation. So we have put things in place. We've automated a lot of the services and so forth, and especially in our golf division, we've done a lot more automation and so forth, because as I say, we're continuing to look for more ways to be efficient.
And how do you feel about whether you satisfied the controller's first recommendation in the audit about future contracts requiring appropriate internal controls and cash handling and reporting and all of that?
We are going to be making a formal report back to the controller next month, but that is exactly what we think. We think we're moving forward and implementing the recommendation that they have here.
Any other thoughts from the controller's office about how they're doing and whether there are still things they could do more efficiently?
We will be requesting a formal response next month, and at that time we'll go do the evaluation of the support documentation for those recommendations.
Okay, well, then we'll hold this one open until that report comes back and you have a chance to evaluate it. When do you think an appropriate time would be to come back?
Probably
60 days?
Yeah, late April, maybe.
Okay, why don't we hold this meeting open until the first meeting in May and ask for a report back at that time. And I thank you both, and we are adjourned.